In recent months, a great deal of attention has been given to the use of deadly force against unarmed assailants. Every time this happens, it makes national news, and we start hearing some of the same questions. How can they justify shooting an unarmed man? Why didn't they just tase him? Couldn't they have just shot him in the leg? Many of these questions are rooted in a misconception of the realities of self-defense. 2013 FBI data shows us that of all murders, 31%, or 3,799, were perpetrated without a gun, and 687 were murdered with fists and feet. Now this is important, so let me say it again. 1 out of 3 murder victims lost their lives at the hands of someone without a gun, and 687 were killed by someone with no weapon at all. Not even a sharp stick. 687 people lost their lives to an unarmed assailant. And just for perspective, that's more than twice as many as were murdered with one of these. Now why do I bring this up? Because it shows a person doesn't need a gun or any kind of weapon to pose a very real and immediate deadly threat. In the 1980s, a police sergeant by the name of Dennis Tueller did some experimenting. What he found, and it's been confirmed many times, is that your average police officer who knows a threat is coming can recognize, draw, and shoot in 1.5 seconds. He further discovered that your average adult male from a dead stop can cover 21 feet in that same amount of time. Now if that attacker had a knife and charged from inside that distance, the officer almost always got stabbed. This shows us more than how dangerous a man with a knife can be. This shows us how quickly these things happen and how little time we really have to react. Imagine, if you will, you're in a large room. 7 yards away from you, there's a fit man that has 80 pounds on you. He's agitated. You haven't seen a weapon, but you don't know. Suddenly he charges you. That's the amount of time you have to recognize what's happening, assess the situation, decide on a course of action, and act. And if you fail to act instantly, you may very well become one of the 687 people who were knocked senseless and beat to death by an unarmed assailant. There's no time for thought here. You have to stop the attack instantly, or become a statistic. Many people seem to have an impression of tasers that's much closer to a science fiction ray gun than it is to reality. In reality, a taser is an extremely short-range, single-shot, unreliable weapon that's much better left to compliance than it is to counter deadly force. This 2008 study conducted for the Department of Justice gives the details. Police tasers have leads that are 25 feet long, but they're not effective out to those distances. The study found that they're only effective within 15 feet, and outside of those distances, it is very unlikely that you'll land both probes. If you fail to land both probes, they don't do anything. The study found that within 15 feet, tasers were deployed successfully 68% of the time. However, it also found that only 31% of people tased ceased aggression immediately, less than 1/3. Even this number is deceptively high. You see, police departments are trained to meet deadly force with deadly force, and aggressive physical resistance with a taser, as you see from this actual police force continuum. Most of the deployments being counted in this study were deployed against someone who was aggressively physically resisting, but not under the direct immediate threat of deadly force. To successfully deploy a taser on a charging suspect would be much more difficult and would have a much lower rate of success. So imagine you're being charged from 21 feet. You have 1.5 seconds to stop the attack. If you reach for your taser, you have 1 shot to land both probes and less than 1 in 3 chance of stopping the attack. If you fail, you're out of time and options. This is the very compelling reason that police departments train their officers to meet deadly force with deadly force and reserve the tasers to encourage compliance of the unruly. I've heard this question many times. Of course, standing on the range, with all the time in the world, it's very easy to hit a target the size of a human thigh. But it may be quite a different thing to hit a charging human leg with very little time and your life on the line. But let's humor this for a moment. Could you reliably hit a charging man in the leg? To find this out, I conducted a little redneck science. I built this rig to simulate a charging human leg. We started with the assailant at 21 feet and our guns drawn at low ready. The rules were simple. As soon as the leg starts moving, you can start shooting, and you stop when it crosses the 6-foot line. Now this is slightly larger than the average thigh, and it took us an average of 2.2 seconds to pull it to 15 feet. As we learned from Tuller, that's significantly slower than an actual assailant. But even with these advantages, in 14 runs and 33 shots fired, we had only 7 valid hits and 3 late hits. Now, contrary to what some movies may have you believe, hits to the extremities generally won't stop an active attacker, and it would be up for debate if any of these hits would have stopped the attack. But what we can say for sure is that we missed completely in 2/3 of the runs, even with a relatively slow-moving target and without the stress of a life-threatening event. Defending our lives by trying to shoot someone in the leg, we didn't fare any better than the guy trying to meet deadly force with a taser. Lastly, any time we're shooting at another human being, we're employing deadly force, regardless of what part of them we're aiming at. We have the femoral arteries running through our legs, and any number of these shots might have severed that. This would be unlikely to stop the attack in time, but would be very likely that the attacker would later die from his wounds. Now we failed to stop the attack and killed the attacker. Not exactly a viable, less lethal option. Over the years, civilian self-defense and police instructors have discovered that when facing an imminent deadly threat, we have very little time to react, and due to stress response have greatly reduced skill. During these events, attempting to employ trick shots or less lethal alternatives will most often result in death. If you want to live, even against an ostensibly unarmed attacker, deadly force must be met with deadly force.